so excited that you're here. I want to thank Susan for inviting me to speak and let her private collection speak to me and then let me speak about it with everybody else. And if you have not had a chance yet to walk through over there and really spend some time with these works, I encourage you to. And you won't get it all done today. You're going to need to come back and look at some of it another day because there are so many powerful pieces. I also want to say tonight, because I haven't been able to say this for a very long time, but I'm so excited because I feel like a mom tonight. I have my daughter's friend here with us tonight, and her friend too, who is also my daughter's friend, but best friends, and it just makes me feel like a mom, and I thought I'd share that with everybody tonight, because that's awesome. So I want to start with a really cool, just short little clip that is a Christie's. It actually is kind of a trailer for an event that they were doing, but it refers to the very first mask that we're going to look at. It was Susan's kind of signature mask for this exhibit. So we're going to make it good. We're not going to really be able to hear the sound, but just watching what happens, I just want you to let yourself get lost in how this happens. I want you to know, if you go to Christie's, you can see this Sonia Huebe. With the music and everything, it's so powerful. But this is why it's awesome to see and important to know as we're looking at this. It's that when you are actually involved with one of these masks, it's lights, it's sound, it's movement. It's not standing on a stand on a shelf somewhere. If you were originally wearing this or using this, that's the kind of experience that you would have. And that's what people don't get oftentimes until you really start digging in to know a little bit more about these beautiful artifacts. So let's look at one of the most important things to start with is where actually we are. What exactly it is in this area of the world where we will be. I have learned, because I was not always familiar with where exactly many of the countries were or where some of the peoples were. I knew that I had to, initially, when I first started studying African art, have a map just like right there beside me. And this is what I started with because to me it wasn't very distracting, but I'm a super color person. The way that I see everything, the way I chart everything is by color. So I quickly learned that much of African art is divided into regions, that much of African history is studied in regions. So I grabbed this map then, but then I discovered, even more importantly, that you have to know the topographical layout of the continent to really understand some of what's going on and some of the reasons why works are created and how they're used. So our first work then that we're looking at is this, I gotta move me to there we go, is the Kikwete mask. And this is the one that Susan has over around the corner over there. It's what we just saw. There are two different kinds. What we want to look at is how we differentiate the two different kinds and why they are used. What is the reason even for having these? Well, to understand that, and here's another one, you have to understand where we are, what's going on. If you look right up here, right up here, the Sonia right here. So when the Sonia moved in, the Sonia and the Luba were at odds quite a bit, and thankfully the river was there to divide them and help them in terms of moving forward. That meant, though, that there was great political upheaval, and it meant then as chieftains are changing and as there are so many rival groups that are trying to vie for power, that there had to be a group that was an oversight group. And that ultimately is how this group evolved that started wearing the Kikwete masks. And here you can see that. Here you see the power figure. So these are the kinds of figures that most people are familiar with when they are looking at African art from this particular region, and it was some of their most powerful. They have supernatural powers. This one actually, at one time, was covered in raffia and beads and other things, and over time that's been stripped down so that you can see the real figure, except that that's not really the real figure. The purpose of it was to dress it, was to add things to it, to add the aspects that were going to give it the supernatural powers that you needed. But what they also needed then were masks to help this particular group. And what I'm showing you here is called the European Fine Art Foundation. This is in the Netherlands. And in 2020, he gathered 9 masks from around the world for this one exhibit. This is an annual exhibit. It runs for 10 days. And this was quite the coup to be able to show this. And there's a wonderful clip, but since we can't have sound with this, it won't work to see. But I'm showing you some of these images to show you how different they look. But look at this for a minute. Ask yourself, what do you see here? And how is that different? I'm not showing it here anymore. Okay, look at it here. And then ask yourself, how is that different from these that you see here? When you're looking at any of the works and trying to differentiate. So this is a male mask. This is a female mask. Now, both of them are going to have great power. The power of the masks is geared toward political control, social hierarchy, trying to establish some kind of oversight group, as I said. The dances would have had great music. The dances would have had lots of light. The women would not be they would not be wielding any kind of witchcraft or sorcery, but the men in this group absolutely were. When they donned the masks, and I'm going to show you how the masks were not alone. They had raffia added to them, they had beads added to them. They were all wonderful ways of capturing and invoking the spirits to help with keeping some kind of order. If nothing else, I mean, that's what we're always striving for anyway, right? But there has to be a sense of, there's an overriding desire for a sense of order. So the male masks, here you can see them with the raffia, and you can see a profile that differentiates the female mask from the male mask. There's quite a crested forehead on a male mask. Female masks are going to be usually white. They will sometimes have some black lines in them. Male masks, on the other hand, are going to have brilliant color. They're going to have a really high end. The more powerful you are within the group, the bigger your mask. That makes sense. Hierarchy of scale has been the way you show power all the way back to 3500 BCE with Narmer's palette and with the standard of Ur in Sumeria. So this carries on. Here you see, though, another thing about this when you're looking at, this doesn't have our date on it. So our date for this is actually 19th century. And the idea here is at the same time that in the European world, they are exploring this way of moving into abstraction to depict figures, that it no longer has to be naturalistic or realistic. And you can see when you look at this, and you know that this is the kind of mask that inspired Picasso. This is the kind of mask that inspired Matisse. And when you look at this, you see that. Now, the creators of the masks did not know Picasso and did not know Matisse. And in fact, Picasso's first real work that exhibits that is 1907, and he didn't even, with Mademoiselle, and he didn't even share it with everybody. He kept it hidden in his studio until his mentor made him take it out. So we see here then, when we're looking at this, we've got bold, broad patterns that sense of geometry when you're looking at this, especially with the protruding mouth and then the heavy eyelids here. And then we look at the female mask. Now you can see reduced the colors. There is a little bit more color on this one over here. When we're looking, it would seem, with a little bit of brown in there. But it's a lower forehead as well. So the other thing about these is when the initiates then, here's a wonderful one that shows, I love this when I found this because it shows it from all different sides. And you really get a sense then if someone were to put this on and all of this falls over his shoulders and then there's a robe or some other kind of fabulous clothing, and then you add beads, and the beads add sound as they move. The raffia makes a sound as they move. So in that sense, this becomes a really incredible event. Okay, so this also then there will be for the initiates, for the young people who are coming into this group. They are going to learn all kind of secret names for things. So, for example, they call the nostrils the opening of the furnace. That's not right there. They'll call the nostrils the opening of the furnace. Or the chin is the snout of a crocodile. Or the eyes are the swellings of sorcerers. And each of those definitions has all kind of meanings. You know, just like when you're, in 3rd and 4th grade and you have one name for your teacher and everybody snickers because it sounds like you're saying, oh, hey, Miss Lollipop, and you really mean something else, right? So that's what's going on there. So Robin Pointer, who is an African art historian, points out that today the masks are no longer used in rituals other than for entertainment. However, these have become very popular in the Western world, in Western markets. And so now most of them are created for that instead of for a ritual purpose. I wanted you to see then this because this is a wonderful example. Now this is a doggone mask. It's not the same kind of mask, but it's the same area of the country and it's the same people. And this is another ritual. And when you're looking at this, you'll see this crossbar. This is their way of, it symbolizes the connection between the heavens and the earth. And so when the dancers are wearing them with the masks and with the headpieces and with all of these beautiful costumes and dancing with those, they become conduits for the spirits to be able to then come into the community and bring order or bring healing to the community depending on what might be needed. So now we're going to go to this one, was one of my favorites. And we were talking about this earlier, the idea that the Nkisi is so powerful, and probably Mary Jo remembers this too from some time ago. So this figure, look, we're right here as we look in Africa, and we're looking at, I want you to take a minute and just look, tell me, just throw out, if you will, we're a real small group. Throw out what you see when you're looking at this.
Emotion in the face.
Okay, we do. There is quite a sense of emotion in the face.
The nail in the middle?
That usually, the nails, especially as his beard and then his knees. What? Ow. But then we've got all over his body, and then this great big huge circular cavity in the middle that is super significant as we're looking at this particular figure, because these power figures that was really small writing. When we changed over, I didn't change the writing, but you don't have to read it because I'm going to tell you that. The middle part of these figures are meant to be medicinal figures. So an Nganga, who is a special medicine person, will fill these figures before they have nails on them, will fill them, the centers, with little medicinal pieces or herbs or any kind of sometimes animal parts that are also have some kind of magic to them. And then it gets sealed. It gets sealed with a mirror, and sometimes it's also on the back as well. And when that happens, then the Nganga has to come in and activate all of the medicine that is in the Nkisi. When he does that by stabbing either a blade or a nail or something into it, the first time that that happens, then he has activated that connection with the spirit. So what are the nails for? What ends up happening? You see on here, how does it protect or serve, or how does it punish as well? Well, and here's another one. I love this one. This guy. The tongue sticking out there. He's like, I got enough. Can we go to somebody else now, right? When you are coming to this, there are two different ways that the Nkisi will act. It can either be something you take an oath. So it may be that Susan and I would go to the Nganga, who's not the Nkisi, and we say, okay, we are making a bond with each other, that we will build a house together. So we would have some kind of dispute that we would, or an oath that we're going to take. So we get a nail into the Nkisi, and that represents that oath that we are taking to either resolve our dispute or to embark on some project or endeavor together. Now, let's say though that I don't follow through with my part of it. Well, Susan can go back to the Nganga when I have done her wrong, and she can take a blade and get a blade into the Nkisi that will then bring me around. It will, I will in some way encounter some kind of reminders, whether it be that I am ill or I have something happen. And then I have the opportunity to come back to the Nganga and say, okay, let's fix this. And you go to Susan and say, okay, let's fix this. So when the original carver starts, he's going to use a single block of wood and cut that one block of wood so it becomes a subtractive method, which means once you subtract more than you need, you're not going to be able to go back. You're going to have to, unless you find some really fabulous way to do that. So, as I said, the Nganga fills all of this to activate the figure with the nails. What you put in the middle is called the longo. There won't be a quiz after class, so you don't have to hold on to that. But here's the thing too, this really empowers your Nganga, right? So you don't want to underestimate the power that the Nganga has as the figure that is the conduit for the spiritual powers that affect your whole community, that empower your community or that settle your community down when things go a little crazy. I love this one. I don't know why, it just kind of reminded me of Mardi Gras. Not because of the green, but the eyes and the hand up with the bracelet on, and clearly with those wide eyes. Maybe it was the red tongue. Maybe it's just that it's Mardi Gras. But all the way around, this is a great example, maybe because I have never seen that one before. This is such a great example. So ultimately, you can contain or release spiritual power within your community, have a positive or a negative effect, either way, with the Nkisi. Also, the different things that you put into the Nkisi will represent whatever it is you've brought to the Nganga as something to resolve or something to fix. This power figure, wow. Whoever's been heading to this one, he has two Vilanga here, and that gives him incredible power when you also are watching the way that how deeply you insert the nail can also be a statement about how intense this is. All right, so here's your Nkisi down here that's over there in the side. So we're going to go now to the Dogon seated couple in Mali. And to do that, this is one of my favorites. And to do that, we're going to go back to our map, see exactly where it is that we're moving, and notice geographically, topographically, this is not just a walk in the park when we're looking at this area. Okay, so this particular, around 15th century, maybe a little bit earlier, the Dogons arrived in this region, and indeed, when they did, they started looking up into the cliffs as a way, a natural defense mechanism against anybody who might be attacking them, and they encountered the Telem, and that became a tad bit of a challenge. Eventually, they did not work well together for a while, and eventually the Telem moved on, or they integrated with the Dogon. But what we see when we're looking at this is this cliff face, and you see here some of what is now abandoned Dogon city dwellings, but way up here you can see where the Telem were living at one time. So, like for me, when I first saw it, I was like, "Ooh, Mesa Verde." It reminded me of that, not only because of the cliff face and trying to find a way to get away from the elements and any attackers, but also when it's abandoned and we don't even know the whole story. So this is Bandiagara Encarpment, and UNESCO describes this as an outstanding landscape of cliffs and sandy plateau with some beautiful architecture. So clearly, we need to be there to see the beautiful architecture, but I'm telling you right now, don't go. Because right now, that has really, if you read most recent news on this particular area, it has become a terrorist cell area, and so people are not feeling safe. The government has said, the tourism, they need to back off on for a little bit. They are now an agricultural area. At one time, they had many more wildlife, and you would find it to be, despite the fact that it's a rocky cliff area, they were not the agricultural area that they are now. That's significant, though, as we move into this, because we're going to look at, here you see the Telem granaries they still try to keep them, to use them. But we're going to look at this doggone Telem figure. This is one of the most popular types right now, because the time that overlap with the doggone and the Telem, sometimes it's hard to find the provenance to know if which of the two cultures it would actually be. This is an Orant figure. So if you think about the Orant figures in the catacombs, if you think about Orant figures in cathedrals, this is the same idea with these figures, the male figures with the raised arms. And one of the thoughts about these is that this was praying for rain. And then one thought is that with this, we see these were wealthy people. This guy, he's got a beard, but look at, he's got great physique, and then all of the jewelry that he wears when you're looking at this. He's got leather. So this altogether means that this guy is an important person. So possibly this was made even as a shrine figure. Possibly this was made. Now when I say a shrine figure, understand that what that means is not that they go put it in a shrine, this becomes the shrine. This is what you carry, you touch it, you rub it, you take any kind of animal sacrifices that you would rub some of the fluids from that or some of the leftover particles on it. This becomes, in so many ways, a portable shrine. But it's also, over and over again, what we're finding is connections to ancestors. Connections, as we go through this, to those who protect us and move us. Okay, so that now, the second most popular kind of sculpture that the Dogon have is this seated couple. This is awesome when we look at this seated couple. The idea then, as we look at this, again, we've got, this is Susan's, and I want you to notice the beading down here. But let's look at, if we can, one that gives us, again, what do we see? What are some of the things here that we're looking at? Anybody want to throw it out? so not what you would expect. Absolutely not what you would expect. This is certainly this arm around we do. We have a guy and we have a husband and wife. He has his arm around her shoulder and rests his hand on her breast. He also then, both of her hands are here on her knees. She's sitting like this with her hands on her knees. And then his other arm drops down here right next to his penis. This is all about the unity of a couple and the way that this will enhance life, continue life. That the whole purpose of this unified couple is to continue family. I also want to show you maybe another one as we're talking about it so that you see on the back. It's so hard to see here, but okay. So we have on the front, we know who the husband and the wife is, but on the back, the wife has a little papoose, a baby in a papoose on her back, and he has a quiver, and that's where all of his arrows would be. So we have the nurturer and we have the protector. We have those symbols to tell us that on the back. Now, one of the things that she writes about, and I love this, is about numerology, and I'm all about numerology. So if we step back and look at this, we see this great use of line, horizontal and vertical line. You have all of these strong verticals, and the horizontals are what are connecting them. The bench down here at the base, and his arm that are connecting them. Otherwise, they are essentially by themselves. Notice that he really can be represented by the number 3. She can be represented by the number 4. And then together they are the number 2. Look down here. At the base we have 4 caryatids. They're holding up the bench on which they sit. Those 4 caryatids represent ancestors. They actually represent all the way back to creation. The doggone people are very much a creation story-centered people, and so they're honoring them 4 of the original children in creation.
How do you get that information?
How do I get that information? I researched it.
Based on the pillars that's involved.
Yes, these are people. It's hard to see right here.
No ancestral spirit.
That it's connection to ancestral spirits. Yeah. This is one of the. Now, I'm glad that you asked that because part of this, all along, interpretations of any of these works are based on archaeologists and anthropologists' stories that they brought back all the way back even to the beginning, the early 19th century. So this is conversations they had early on and wrote about, and now our historians today are building on that. And Barbara, the lady I was talking about, Barbara DeMott, has built on that. Yeah. Now, Carrie Clem will be the first to tell you don't want to rest everything on the creation stories because we're not sure that the creation stories as we understand them today are the creation stories that in the early 19th century are exactly the same as the way we do them today.
The only reason I inquired is because a large percentage of the Dominant tribe tradition is oral.
Yes.
So unless you have that traditional information transmitted to you,
Right.
bloodline, lineage line down, I'm just.
Which is why I agree with you, which is why I said I was glad that you asked, because this is information that we have now that was shared with archaeologists and anthropologists at the early part of the 19th century. We wrote that down and brought that back. And at the end of today, I'm happy to look up his name for you if you want, if you're interested. Because that is exactly what Steve Zucker and Carrie Clem are saying, that you've got to be careful of assigning everything into a creation story. Yeah. That you have to be sure that you understand. Now there's a name for these 4 figures within the creation story that I don't remember. But I can look that one up. Yeah. In my notes, before we go, I will look those up for sure. Okay, so what was this used for then, is another question that you would ask. And here I like this picture because it brings us up close to the quiver and to the baby. But when we're looking then at these works, the idea that, oh, this is good, possibly used for funeral processions in the same way that in the Etruscan world or the Roman world, use busts of your ancestors as processional, possibly used as altars for ancestors to honor them, and then again that it might represent the primordial care, but that again is not something to rest everything on. So we have distinctly complementary characteristics of male and female. We have this wonderful union represented between the man and the wife, this great bilateral symmetry. When we're looking at this, those are all characteristics of these works that bring, again, a sense of order. So I wanted to show you then this. I like this. Henry Wiley did this doggone couple in 2008. What we get now when we're looking at, and there's a second one that he did here as well. Wonderful works. And what he is best at is using irony and parody to challenge accepted notions of history, to challenge what people consider about power and representation. And he gives us juxtapositions that make us step back and go, oh yeah, there's another way to see the world. And here we get this doggone couple, these two different ones that are modeled after the archetypal sculpture that we just looked at. That ancient symbol of creation absolutely applies here. Ancient interdependence between two people. And here we've got two young men assuming the same pose that the earlier couple did. And then especially in the background, this connection to the global community now by bringing in this kaftan, the cloth that was originally imported from the Dutch for Southeast Asia, also from Southeast Asia, and eventually becomes a symbol of African identity. All right, so now we want to look at mother and child. We have three over here, really beautiful. I'm going to focus on one of them. In 1491, Congo King Zinga Nkua converted to Christianity. And his son, when his son became here, he made it legal, made Christianity legal. What this does for us, or for them, is it opened the door to enhance diplomatic relations with Europe, but it also meant then that there were European images and iconography that started influencing African ideas. So we have here this female mother with child, and I especially love this one because in the Smithsonian Museum of African Art, so this is in the exhibit right now, Heroes, Principles of African Greatness. And I love it that a mother and child is recognized as hero in this exhibit of Principles of African Greatness. So take a minute and look and see what you see. Anybody? What pops out?
The patterns and details on her chest and head.
No, aren't those brilliant? We see this beautiful scarification on her body and on her head and on her hat, and that is quite the eye catcher and is a symbol of beauty. It's the more scarification you might find on a person, the more beautiful the person is perceived to be. I think the beaded necklace just really pops out right away. And it also tells us that she also either belongs to or represents a wealthy person. What else do we see?
Look, focus is more so on the mother than the child, after some focusing on motherhood as well.
And And that's so very important in this particular, when we're moving into this world. It's actually, there's so, the matrilineal line in so many of, all across the African world is recognized, celebrated, and especially captured in sculpture and in their art. So we look at this, we see in this particular line, we've got those mirror-covered cavities that we saw in the Nkisi, but that's not the purpose that they serve here. In this one, those mirror cavities are holding protective kind of medicines so that the baby will grow to be a wonderful leader or a wonderful mother, either way. So it's a protective medicine when we look at that. Here, I like this one too because it gives you that great image across the back. If you have seen Black Panther, this you should right away, this would bring to mind the scarification in that too, that was so fabulous and spoke to, what is Michael B. Jordan's character's name? Yes, so it speaks to his power and his prowess as well. We think that these figures might be connected to Pemba. Pemba, it's a women's cult that is said to have been founded by a famous midwife concerned with fertility and treatment of infertility. And so having a figure like this is, and others similar to other figures, is going to help if you are trying to protect against infertility. So, as I said earlier about this particular sculpture, not this one, but the one that Susan has, and Susan has three over here, similar, but especially the one that Susan has over here on the left that is seated on top of a bench or a platform or a podium. Anytime that you see that someone is elevated in that way, then that elevates the status of that person within the community. But the idea then that possibly now the iconography of mother and child from Europe has filtered in, and so some of this is connected possibly to the iconography of mother and child. We see when we're looking at these, all of this really great way of, especially these beautiful headdresses here and the beading. And then some babies are going to be nursing. Some babies are simply holding their mother's breast. Some babies, like one that Susan has over here, the baby has hands in his mouth. I wasn't able to find what that was, so there's some works that we still get to kind of explore, because for me, when I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's a kid all the time, hands in a mouth. On the other hand, is that a way of saying, whoa, something's up, we're not sure, and so that's fun to explore. So our last work then that we're going to look at tonight is probably, other than the Nkisi, my favorite of them all. So we're looking at now the Akuaba. Akuaba is plural, Akuama would be singular, from the Asante people. And this is an incredible, it has a really great story when we're looking at that. Here's where we are. This is, the Akan people are not specific to just one country. This region is where you would have found them. And these wonderful little figures give us so many great stories. What do you see when you're looking at this? Sometimes everybody's kind of like, it's kind of obvious, lady. We have those round disc-like heads, and then we've got kind of like arms sticking out and a stick. But sometimes when you start actually saying what you see, and then you start noticing more. Look at the difference in the two eyes. Look at the difference in the nose. Look at this very high forehead. So part of that is a modeling with the materials, and part of that is indicating what actually then mothers are doing with babies' heads when they're first born, just in trying to round them. And we do that too, protecting these babies' heads, right? So we have the short, we've got this columnar kind of base when we're looking at this. So the tradition is, the story is, Look at these, all different kinds, right? The story is that a woman named Aquila wanted so to become pregnant and to have a family, and she was not succeeding year after year. So she finally went to a priest, and he charged her with having a surrogate child. So they created this surrogate child, this columnar figure with a head on top, and she wore it, just like we saw on the doggone couple in the little papoose. She wore it in her papoose. She got great grief for that for the longest time as she did it, but every day, every night she took care of it. She treated it as if it were her own child, and then she became pregnant, and then she had the baby, and the baby was healthy. And so that then inspired other people to do the same. And eventually then this became a popular choice on the part of people to do, especially to protect the idea of having a healthy baby. So here you see yet another. Now, when you're looking at this, you'll notice that on many of these we have these rings on their necks. And these are actually rolls of fat. That's what they represent, because that indicates that the woman is strong and healthy, and that the woman is capable then of carrying a child to term. And so you want your child from early on to also be able to do that. And you'll find, if you look at Monday masks or Bundu masks, that you'll see the chins that are just double, triple, and it's representing, because these masks, the Mende and the Bundu masks, are for, we don't have those here, but this is part of the initiation ritual for young women as they then become from girls to women, especially after they have had initiation rites and circumcision, that they're ready to become mothers. So the icon, again, another matrilineal society. And so most of these are carved as female. So this aquaba, or the aquama, I love this one. I just love the rich colors to this. And again, like I say, now people make them not simply for the same reason that aqua did, but now they've become quite the commodity in the Western world. But we have wisdom, we have girth, we have the prime of life, we have physical and mental characteristics that make this child then is going to be a great woman. And Will and Grace even have one in their husband. Right there. That is just a statement. Once now we've come to the Western world, and they are like I say, commodities. You'll find if you walk into a store, they'll be used for jewelry, a jewelry holder, or they'll be used for, again, so many of these artifacts that no longer, and it's so important, even as you were bringing up earlier, it's so important to go back to what the original function, the original content. You don't ever want to strip it down and say, this is now a new function, and then call it by the same name, because it's not going to be the same art if you do that. So I encourage you then to take time to look at any of the work. If you don't know Susan's sitting right here. If you have questions about her beautiful artifacts, I'm sure she would love to tell you about them. And if you have any questions about what I've just shown, or if you want a name, then hang out. I'll look it up.
Okay.